name's Libby and I have been living in Helena for 23 years this June. My father was in the military, and after that I was in school, or my husband was in the military, and I never lived in one house for more than 3.5 years until I moved here. And I really enjoyed getting to know my neighborhood, my neighbors, and the community. Helena's a really special place. And I think I bring some of my experiences of living in different parts of the country as well as outside of the country to my position on the school board. I'm also the mother of 4 children who've all attended schools here in Helena. I'm very grateful for the education that they received, and I'd like to do what I can to help make sure that the children today and tomorrow also have a fine education and are provided with what they need to be successful in their lives.
What are some of the things that you think are most important to the students and parents that you represent?
Well, I know today one of the main concerns that parents and community members and students have is safety. We've had some unfortunate incidences in this country, and then right here which pertain to personal safety. And then there's also the issues regarding building. And we know that we have an aging infrastructure here in Helena, and we need to do something about that. While I've been on the board, the whole time I've been on the board, we have been looking at what needs to be done to address the building needs. Assessment of the buildings, demography studies that we've just been receiving, and a thoughtful examination of the budget to see what can we afford. Before we look forward this fall, it's hoped to go and ask the members of our community what are they willing to support for our building needs. In addition, we've addressed the request of the administrators in the building and also parents and students as well to have cameras to provide extra security, as well as the dogs which we had, the drug and gun dogs, to be frank, but who would never be examining an individual. Mm-hmm. It's all would always be the physical plant, not the individuals. I think these are some of the things we can do, as well as other measures which have been identified by the administration, by security individuals that they've consulted, as far as name tags, reducing the numbers of entryways, as we look at renovating our buildings or building a new building to incorporate as many up-to-date safety measures as we can. Also, another issue is to prepare our students for the future, a future which we really don't know. Things change so quickly. Technology is a tool, but it's something that you have to have. When I was in high school, you still used a mimeograph machine. So the world has changed greatly. My 2-year-old great niece has more facility with a cell phone than many adults that I know. So children really know how, they're comfortable with technology, but they need to learn how to use that tool.
Overcrowding in Helena's schools, how do you think the district handles it, and do you think there's something that we could be doing?
Well, the state has standards that dictate the size of classes, and if you exceed that, which rarely do we, but it does happen, then you're required to, at the elementary district, I don't think that we have overcrowding in the high schools, but in the, you would have to add paraprofessional support to the teacher. I think it's an hour and a half per day for each child over the maximum number, which graduates from, I think, 20 at kindergarten, and then it goes up to, I think, about 30 in the high schools. So our classes themselves are not overcrowded. In fact, we keep our numbers below the maximum whenever possible. Some of the buildings are older. Helena High School is an example. The hallways are narrow, and buildings have been added on to without making provisions for extra library space, hallways, cafeteria, and the idea of asking the public to pass a bond which would cover addressing those issues, commons areas such as you'd find at a college, at our high schools, having wider hallways. We we'd like to be able to add a career and technical education center for our high schools. If you look at Jim Darcy, we did address the issue of having to bus students into town from there and added another kindergarten class. Well, those kindergartners are going to be in first grade next year, and we already have a modular unit ordered to be in place when school starts to accommodate those students, because we will have a third kindergarten there this year as well. But our kindergarten enrollment overall for this coming year has expanded. Unfortunately, on the downside, the demographers have told us this is a bubble that will pass through, and once they're done, then our enrollment should return to about what it is now.
Talk about how the district handles the budget and the approach to levies, and if you think that there could be any improvements with that.
We're all at the maximum that voters can provide for us, or some of them may be at 99%. In addition, we're going to have the building reserve levy, which will be up. It expires next year, so this would mean it would run concurrently for 2 years, which is how it was when this ran before. For the one that's in place now, it also ran for 2 years. We're very hopeful that the voters will pass that, because with the extra expenses that we've incurred with having to shutter Central School and move students and staff around, we have incurred extra costs, and that would be very helpful to us in covering those and having extra modular units or whatever we need to do to be able to make sure that we provide the best space possible for all of our students. But as far as getting back to the budget, most of the budget is for salaries. The biggest resource that our district has is the people. And we have very dedicated, hardworking teachers, custodians, secretaries, maintenance workers, administration, everyone who comes together to keep the doors of our schools open, the lesson plans in place, and to address all of the various issues that our district faces. And that total comprises about 90 to 92% of our budget, which after you pay we allot 4% for utilities, only leaves 5% for everything else. And so there's a lot of thought that goes into carefully spending every penny. And we've had very clean audits, and there's a lot of thoughtful attention that goes into preparing those budgets. And when we are faced with, today on this evening's budget will be a math assessment curriculum or program. That's $800,000. So trying to find a way to come up with those dollars with all of the other constraints that we have is a challenge. And I know that Dr. Colgin and Kim Harris, the district business manager, and all the other administrators, as well as the principals and the teachers, all work very hard to make sure we spend those dollars the best way we can.
Okay, perfect. Talk a little bit about the proposal of a school in the Valley. How high of a priority is it for the district? How important do you think it is? And how do we get there?
We engaged on our long-range educational planning process, and then which we did over this past year, and Dr. Colgin went out to each school to discuss what the needs were of each of those buildings. And one idea that was proposed, however, when I say this, soon we will have the recommendation of Dr. Colgin combined with what the demographers recommend for which will set the stage for asking the voters to consider a levy in the fall. So the thoughts that I have right now may change based upon what information comes in. But currently at Jim Darcy, there's room for 300 students, plus we added a kindergarten and they're going to be in the modular, so we're a little above that. And there's 540 students who live in that area, so the others are being placed at other schools. The idea that's currently being considered is to build a building that would accommodate those students, so they would not be having to be bused into town. One idea was that a new school could be built right next to that building, and the old one would be torn down, so there wouldn't be the disruption of having to place those students somewhere else, which would entail busing during that time. Obviously, that's something we need to consider very carefully to make sure there are no safety considerations or other things that we would need to be concerned about. The cost for that is not as great as building a new school because we already have a school now. If you look at building a totally new school, then the extra costs are concerned because you need a principal, secretaries, custodians, maintenance, utilities, and those costs add up quickly, and they have to come out of that 4 or 5% that I mentioned before. So I know Dr. Kuljan has given a lot of thought to various ways that we might be able to do something like that.
And what are some things that you think may be necessary to change in the district?
As I mentioned before, we have a very supportive community, not only with their dollars, but also with their time. And I think that there's a need to address various issues. We've had a grant that has helped coordinate different community nonprofit organizations and has also provided substance abuse counselors in our schools. And I was at the forum last night about mental health that addressed some of those issues because that grant will come to an end, and how will those very necessary interactions take place so that we can make sure that needs of our students are identified. We know that unfortunately a certain percentage of our students have mental health problems. It's an issue that's a challenge for people to discuss. It's uncomfortable. We don't like to do that, but when we don't, we have students who find themselves using substances to address those feelings that they have. We've had some suicides. We want our students to graduate and be healthy. I think that's and this is an issue that is preventing that from happening. And so it's important, I think, for our whole community to be able to come together and address this issue and find ways to help support our students and their families